The CPI report, Child Protection in Iowa, brought to you by Vocal, Victims of Child Abuse Laws. You can watch our program on Mediacom Channel 15, Sunday afternoon at 1 o'clock, Wednesday evening at 9:30. You can email us at vocaliowa@mchsi.com. We welcome your telephone calls, parents and grandparents. We try to help and talk to you on a one-to-one basis. My number is 515-276-3956. John's number is area code 515-282-2672 here in Des Moines, Iowa. My name is Don Burgmaier, and with me at the controls is my co-host,
John Harvey, and welcome to the CPI report. CPI, that stands for Child Protection in Iowa. We also look after other things too, such as court reform. So you'll be hearing from one of the gentlemen on our program regarding court reform in just a few minutes. You know, there's a lot of things that we need to be doing. I'm checking in right now to see when the budget hearing at the governor's office is to take place. When I called them or tried to check on them, they weren't really sure when. And every year, back in the old days, Don, do you remember we used to go down to the budget hearing every single year?
Yes, we did.
And when you signed up for that, it simply meant that you got to talk before a group of people, and the governor was always there.
And Vilsack said he watched our program.
Oh, yes, right. So we're only too happy to watch the governor as he struggles with the budget, and I don't mind telling him a few things about what kinds of difficulties we see in that budget process. You know, we've got an agency that is burning up 2.3, at least at one time when I looked at the whole budget, it was $2.3 billion. Now that is a lot of money. Now if that's going for a valid cause, if it's being spent wisely, and if it's doing the job, well, sooner or later the department should shut down if they're doing the super job, right? It's not like a library that goes on and on and on forever. A helping organization should find its way of helping itself out of business. I hope one day to shut down this organization. Once everybody is satisfied that the Department of Human Services is running like clockwork, is following the rules of the court, is following the statutory requirements. You know, we could pack up anytime, couldn't we, Don? Because we'd no longer be needed. By the way, Dan Boddicker, who headed the Department of Human Services Council, that is an organization that, he was head of a legislative committee, a joint committee. And here's what Dan Boddicker one time said about the department. He said, someday I'd like to see a for rent sign on the Department of Human Services building. It means they'd no longer be necessary. Wouldn't that be great, Don, to see that for rent sign on the department, meaning that no longer would we have to endure the difficulties, the costs, and so forth that are involved. Now, you had a comment there.
I just drove by 1200 University yesterday, and the sign is still there for sale, and that's on the east side. So I'm wondering if they want to sell half of the building that they must not need anymore.
Well, it's hard to tell because they're in rented facilities, and you know very well that they're not going to delete any of their positions. They're not going to delete any of their offices just because you saw the 1200 part shut down. Doesn't mean that they haven't moved to what do they call that one down in the the old Target building. They've moved a lot of their facilities down there, and they've moved other places as well. And it seems like a never-ending spending spree that they're on here. But of course, as long as you can go to the state legislature and they keep saying yes, by the way, they don't really know for sure where all that money is going. I kind of wonder why you would need the vast sums that they're spending right now. In fact, there are one area that concerns me the most. Maybe I shouldn't say concerns me the most, because there's several areas that concern me, and that is where they have a statutory area for child protection, but then if you don't meet the guidelines for that particular area so they can come in and intervene in your family, they have another way of talking you in to receiving services if you can't do it the way the legislature had originally intended. So what they're doing is what I call enlarging the borders of their tent. And I'd like to see the time when we do a full-scale investigation of the Department of Human Services. Go in there with bayonets flashing. And,
be careful of that. We're not here to go that far.
And, you can to the structure, and cut that budget like crazy. Cut it to the quick, because there are a lot of things that are going on that is simply a waste of taxpayer dollars. And this intervention, in many cases, in cases where they're intervening in families where there is no child abuse report even. How can they justify statutorily intervening in a family where they do not have statutory authority to intervene, and in doing so, using up all kinds of taxpayer dollars? And I know one state representative was pretty disgusted when he came into office a few years back and said that there were 33 lobbyists meeting with him from the Department of Human Services. It wasn't from just that agency, it was from a multitude of other agencies that profit from the existence of the Department of Human Services. Well, number one, what would we do if we got a chance to investigate the Department of Human Services? First of all, you'd say on that investigating committee, we will have no one who profits from the status quo. In other words, if you're going to change something, you're going to want to find people in there who are inundated by the department, not those who are enriched by the department. I've watched many of these investigating committees operate. One of them cost the state $205,000 just to do a short investigation. And what they come out with is worse than what they went in with. Those kinds of investigations I am not interested in participating in, or encouraging the use of government funds to accomplish. There's been several of them. The earliest one I think that I recall was done by the Kemp organization in I believe it was 1988. They did another one in 1991, and they've done several of them. I worked on one task force in which I was the lone voice for the people. Everybody else profited from the governmental affairs of the Department of Human Services, and it doesn't seem right to investigate an organization if the organization's people there are there to protect what they have vested. I don't think it hurts to have government people there to advise or to inform or to cross-examine but I don't want to see those kind of people made a voting member of the organization. I think we could cut back, and I think we could probably do more good for the right people than you can imagine if we just tend to business. If we just, and I think one of the best things that could happen right now is something called a performance audit. A performance audit of the department. Now, performance, you've heard of audits. That's when you go through the money drawer and make sure that there is rationale for the expenditures. But a performance audit says, let's go through the statutes and see if the organization is meeting its requirements in following the statutes. Some of them are very poorly cared for, particularly in the, wouldn't you say, Don, in the area of appeals. They don't follow the statutes. They just turn it over to people like Mary Kay Wickman and who is the Miller, Kay Miller Todd.
Partly,
and
Mary Kay Wickman and Todd, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Partly the reason why they don't follow the statutes because they'd lose at that point.
Right. And they have all kinds of tricks they pull, and then we have to build up the court dockets, you see, in order to appeal what they have put into place as their administrative hearing process. And it doesn't make much sense to set up an organization that brings about all kinds of hearings and appeals. There's something like at one time there were 49,000 people on the child abuse registry. That's a lot of people, a lot of book work, a lot of appeals pending, and so forth. So basically, Don, I'd like to see a full-scale investigation after we do a performance audit. Are there any areas of the statute that are not being attended to by the Department of Human Services? Are they doing things that they're not permitted to do by statute? And are they performing those things that statute would like for them to perform? Wouldn't that be marvelous if we could trim that thing down, do a better job with less money? Now's the time to do it. We don't have a real director in place, and perhaps it would be a good time to straighten the department up, get it in shape, so we know what kind of a director to look for. Perhaps we could tread water as far as having a real director in place until things are set up, instead of finding a director that will carry on the status quo. Well, enough of that discussion. Don, one of the more difficult things in all the world is to change the Constitution. And we don't want to make it a simple process, because if it's a simple process, we'd get amendments to the Constitution every third Thursday. But and you don't want to have the document opened up. But there is an organization that you read about that is attempting to change the Constitution for the purpose of strengthening parental rights. Would you tell us something about that?
This article is from parentalrights.org. Contact your representative today and urge them to support the Parental Rights Amendment. The Parental Rights Constitutional Amendment Bill has just been introduced in the House of Representatives. Our bill number is HJRES 97. Representative Pete Hoekstra introduced the proposed constitutional amendment, which is designed to preserve and protect parental rights with future erosion, or from future erosion. In other words, they keep chiseling and eroding away our parental rights, and they want to stop that from happening. Preserving parental rights for future generations to come is an issue that concerns every parent across this nation. Well, I'm saying it should concern every parent, but too many times parents are just getting they have their own struggles in life, and they just are trying to get by, so they don't put out any effort to protect their own interests as well as future generations. That is why now is the time to get your congressperson to support this vital bill. The introduction of the Parental Rights Amendment signals the opening of an important discussion in Congress, so we encourage you to begin engaging Congress on the issue of parental rights today. Contact your congressman. Write or call or email and tell them you stand in support of HJRES 97. That's the Parental Rights Constitutional Amendment. Encourage them to contact Representative Pete Hoekstra to add their name to a list of potential co-sponsors. And look for more updates as we move forward with this vital effort. Sincerely, Krista Wright, Deputy Director, parentalrights.org. So you can type in parentalrights.org into your computer on the internet and get some information there. Okay, John.
Okay, you're right. www.parentalrights.org. And you can sign up, and you'll get messages from time to time from this organization to see how they're coming along with this constitutional move. Do you know why it's necessary? Well, you can read that on the website, but I can give you a quick clue. There are a number of ways in which parental rights can be devastated. First of all, it can be devastated by foreign treaties, and we have to honor treaties in the United States as if they were constitutional law. It isn't until we pass an amendment that we can protect parental rights from invasion from these kinds of treaties. And you'll also note that even the most conservative Supreme Court justices, even though they're the kind of justice that believes strongly in a Constitution and in its original intent, and maybe we should pat them on the back because they do this. They said, we cannot protect parental rights. Now, isn't that strange? Why can't they protect the constitutional rights of parents? Because it's not in the Constitution. Well, of course, we do everything else that's not in the Constitution, but this particular one, when Scalia and others were asked to look into protecting parental rights, they said, not unless it's in the Constitution. Do you find it in the Constitution as one of the enumerated powers of the Constitution to protect parental rights? It's one of those strange things because to protect parental rights, as far as the Founding Fathers were concerned, I don't suppose it even occurred to them that you would have to write that into the Constitution. There were so many other things like the king crossing the threshold and tax laws and so forth where they were being besieged by the king. Nowhere near being taxed as heavily as we are today, but in early times there were other weightier concerns than parental rights, and parental rights were not under attack, and so they didn't have to become a part of what they believed to be fitting for the United States Constitution. Well, enough of that discussion. Parentalrights.org. Get on the computer and find out about parentalrights.org. That's an organization that is founded by Homeschool Legal Defense. homeschool legal defense didn't realize that they would have so much to do with parental rights, but they soon caught on that they are in the midst of all kinds of battles across the United States because officials do not understand or appreciate parental rights. And we even still have people today who say that homeschoolers simply keep their children at home so they can beat them. What a silly, silly notion. Well, one of the things that we have to clear out of the way are the interferences of the Department of Human Services and other like agencies. However, in doing so, we must rely upon a court that is articulate, a court that is fair, a court that recognizes the rights of the folks. And those courts are not always shaped up to do that. Do you want to listen to someone who knows a little bit about shaping up the courts, reforming the courts, and our famous judge of the judges? If so, tune in with me to listen to Terrance Walker, Judge of the Judges. Your Honor?
That's good. I like that. You always build me up real good there, John. Appreciate it. Yeah, I think that's a very interesting conversation you had there. I'd like to expound on it. Part of the thing is, John, that when we have a document such as the Constitution, it's designed to contract, to cover all bases. So, I find it interesting that modern day court will say that, well, there is no parental rights. Well, what is the definition of life, liberty, and happening? What is property and liberty rights? I thought, just a few years back that the Supreme Court had basically said a parent has a protected right to the care, custody, and liberty of a child, but it seems that they're backpedaling here with this modern, this newer ruling.
But also, it seems like if you get into federal court, people can win up there. But we play with, or we're down here in the district court level, juvenile court, and they don't pay attention to upper court rulings. Terrance?
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the things I was going to get at is that, we actually, have these documents that's supposed to contract, but, at the same token, I mean, I could understand that there's no guidance as far as, how to implement those things, but, this is the thing that we have to deal with. But I think when an upper court does draw the line and lay forth the line, I think a lot of the lower courts, they should fall in line and respect those rulings. And a lot of times they just clearly don't, and it's just done on a case-by-case basis. Sometimes, because of some influence of a particular party or of a particular attorney in a case, and sometimes it may be because you're not the more influential party that you may find yourself getting the shaft in court. And this is why I actually, one of the main reasons why I actually have started this crusade to be on this show, and I've been doing this a number of years, because when you go to court, it seems like nowadays, in a lot of instances, and I've been through several cases myself, civil and on the criminal side, representing myself, but I also have helped people as far as pointing them to different resources and to different authorities that they can use in their cases as well. But the thing that I've always found very, very offensive to the whole sense of justice and to the justice system here in America, which, growing up in America, we're led to believe that this is one of the most fairest places on earth. It was very much an unnerving and eye-opening experience to find out that that's not always the case when you go to court here in America, because it's based on who knows who. A lot of times it's also based upon who has the most influence, and it's also based upon, you know, the type of case that you have and what type of lawyer you have. So it's a lot of different factors that come into play, which, you know, they can actually do what they want to court. And if you have someone that's very skillful in the art of writing, and you're in a courtroom in a court type setting, and you have people that are highly skilled in writing, it's nothing for them to mince words, parse words, and to basically omit the basis of your grievance in the court. Or you could, I mean, you know, just like I was saying last week, or the last episode that we did, I brought up a fictitious sample of what really goes on in a court type setting, and how a person bringing up an issue can get their issue sidetracked, and the judges and the clerks that work for them cleverly can actually avoid your argument and act as if they have actually ruled on your argument. And you know, this happens all the time. A lot of people don't realize this, but this is what goes on, and that's why I've constantly said, and I'll keep stating this. This is a fundamental truth, and it really applies to the situation of a courtroom setting nowadays in America. And I'll keep saying this until they fix the problem. An absence of an issue does not mean that the issue wasn't absent. So the absence of an issue does not mean that the issue was absent. I stated it correctly the second time. The absence of an issue does not mean the issue was absent. What does that mean? That means that if you raise an issue, a party raises an issue in court, and it doesn't get addressed by the court, it doesn't mean that the person didn't raise it up. But a lot of times, this is what happens. And, you know, I think I should kind of go over just briefly the last example that I brought up in which this was done. And this is a fictitious example, and I'll put this on the screen there. If you want to, actually, I'll just read it here. Say, for instance, there was a law designed to curb moonshine. Now, this is just a hypothetical example. And say, for instance, I got cited or arrested for violating this law for going to a convenience store and not getting moonshine, but actually getting cranberry juice. Well, and this could be a mistake by the authorities, whomever, but 9 times out of 10, mistakes by the authorities in this regard are still fought over zealously and prosecuted zealously by the powers that be, and also it would seem also the judges fall in line and follow suit with the prosecution theory in most instances. Now, let's just say I brought a dismissal motion to this charge because I wasn't drinking moonshine. That's what the law states, is somebody who was drinking moonshine or planned to drink moonshine. But I was actually going to the convenience store with an orange color cup to get cranberry juice and got cited. Now, this is an example of a motion to dismiss in that case. Mr. Walker was walking down the street to go to the store. He never claimed to be getting orange juice. Even assuming he was getting orange juice, and I would be citing a legal authority at this point. Hopkins versus McKinney only states that a man was guilty of possession of illegal beverages because he had moonshine. And I would actually quote this. Hopkins knew he shouldn't have had the moonshine. Whether or not he mixed it up with the orange juice at the store was guilty. Just because Hopkins' moonshine was mixed with orange juice, it doesn't make the orange juice illegal. Mr. Walker was in fact getting cranberry juice, but this is irrelevant. At any rate, Mr. Walker's orange-colored cup he bought for the refill of cranberry juice doesn't make this cranberry juice orange juice. And Mr. Walker has a complete defense to this charge, and his dismissal motion should be granted. Now, granted, this is a fictitious case, and in this, we're actually citing the case of Hopkins versus McKinley, where the guy actually was arrested and was guilty because he had moonshine. Now, he also had it mixed with orange juice, but this is how the courts are twisted, and this is how some of the legal practitioners will twist up the meaning of different cases. But this is what they would write in response, and this is a hypothetical question. This is the prosecution. Mr. Walker was walking down the street to go to the store for some orange juice. Going to the store for orange juice is illegal. Mr. Walker knows he was trying to drink illegal orange juice. We can't let him get away with that. He claims he was going to the store for cranberry juice, but he had none. Mr. Walker has no defense to the charge, and his dismissal motion should be denied. Now, in this hypothetical example, the prosecution does not cite the case. They do not quote the case. They might put the case on their piece of their documented paper and argue that this is what this means. But when it comes down to it, their case does not say that they're relying on. The case does not say that a person going to the store for cranberry juice does the same thing as a guy that has cranberry or the moonshine mixed with orange juice. But this is how they'll stretch it. They're going to stretch it to see if it will fit to a guy that had an orange color cup that was getting cranberry juice. And this is an example. I think we should put that on the thing. This is kind of an example of what a judge not adhering to principles of carefully following the law would actually write, and not carefully considering both sides of the case. Now, these charges are brought under Section 222 of the Iowa Code, punishable by 100 years in prison. Now, Mr. Walker filed a motion to dismiss his moonshine and drinking and mixing charges because he wasn't drinking. It appears that Mr. Walker is mistaken. Orange juice is a juice, and Walker's juice was illegal. Mr. Walker also appears to have believed that he can escape the charges because he had an orange colored cup. Hopkins versus Kenny does not state that. Therefore, the motion is denied. Now, this is what they do. Now, if you look at that statement, orange juice is a juice and Walker's juice was illegal. If you look at that statement, it has absolutely nothing to do with the original assertion by Mr. Walker that this case, Hopkins versus Kenny, in that case, the guy had orange juice mixed with moonshine, and they basically was saying the opposite. Whether or not he had it mixed up with orange juice at the store, he was guilty. They wasn't necessarily saying that the orange juice was the culprit, was the illegal culprit of the whole thing, but somehow this gets all lost in these red herring, nonsensical statements that are not only hurled at through the case by the prosecution, but also confirmed and also very confusing manner and irrelevant manner. All these statements are just hurled together out there with no relevance whatsoever, and the whole issue will get ignored. This is what typically goes on in the American court system, and it's an appalling thing that transpires. I think what the court system in America should do, if it really wants to straighten things out, all we need to do is look at the example of the NBA. Now, just last week, Tim Dunleavy, who was a referee for the NBA in the past, he was just given 15 months in prison for fixing basketball games. Now, we see a lot of numerous reports about judges going and getting ethically sanctioned for drinking and driving and doing things in a criminal manner, you know, outside of the courtroom that have no bearing on the courtroom necessarily, that get sanctioned and have these ethical penalties or whatnot. But we don't have any referee that is getting sanctioned for doing something that is involved in the game. Now, if you're going to be sanctioning these judges, let's sanction them for doing things wrong in the game. But we don't have those sanctions. So the NBA, in my mind, has an even greater ethical standard than our own American court system, because there's nobody that's going to sanction these referees that we call judges that are doing bad calls in the game. Now, if we're going to have an ethical system and we're going to have people to review the referees in that system, then we've got to actually look at what's going on in the game and be willing to follow through with penalties for bad calls in the game. But that's what we're totally lacking, and that's why the American justice system, in my opinion, is not up to par and not even up to a standard of ethical nature like the NBA. And that's my whole 2 cents on it. So
You were talking about the orange juice and mixing it up with cranberry juice and trying to win the case that way. What you were describing sure sounds to me like how the assistant attorney general's office handles their cases against parents in front of the court. They'll twist things around, and the whole issue
They're
is
excellent at that.
totally
Right.
different. And the parents start out maybe innocent, hopefully innocent, in some cases totally innocent, and they'll throw in the cranberry orange juice issue, and the judge will rule in their favor.
Yep.
Unbelievable.
And they'll just throw that in there. So you just got cranberried with an orange color cup. You got a moonshine charge, and you wondering why you got a moonshine charge, and you had an orange color cup, and you're going to get cranberry juice. What the heck does this have to do with moonshine?
Money.
Exactly.
The Attorney General's office, John Parmeter, told me one time years ago, thank you for your business. If we
Exactly.
didn't have parents out there losing our rights, so that the Attorney General's office had to fight for this, the state of Iowa, and where do they get their money? From taxpayers, from the citizens of Iowa, our parents losing their rights, giving these people jobs. Terrance?
Yep.
Have you seen the onslaught of prosecutorial error like it has erupted in the last 10 or 15 years?
Well, I mean, in my whole experience, my whole lifetime experience dealing with the courts, I mean, this has been a game that has been going on. This is a fixing game. They fix these games like this all the time. But we don't have anybody that's willing to go out there and actually sanction the Tim Dunleavys of the judicial spectrum. We don't have anybody that's going to actually call them at their bad calls and actually have hearings concerning their bad calls and actually put them under their feet under fire and put them in a penalty type of situation and penalize them and get them out of there. What we have is a system designed to ignore their bad calls. So there's no bad. If you actually send something to the Judicial Qualifications Commission and you say, hey, well, in this game there was a bad call, and when we're talking about games, I'm using this game as a metaphor, and we're using the court case. So So let's say we complain to the Judicial Qualifications Commission and say, oh, there was a bad call in this court case. Well, what they're going to say is, well, basically, this is the way the game is played,
Right.
and you're going to get a letter that basically does almost the same equivalent thing that the judge did to you in that ruling, and they're going to basically send the same kind of letter to you. So I mean, if the referees, the people that are watching the referees are doing it, why not? Why it's no wonder that all the referees are doing it. It's just they're calling bad calls, and they're supposed to. The system is set up for them to call bad calls and just turn the other way.
You know, it occurred to me while you were talking there, a couple of things. We heard from a fast-talking attorney on this program who told us do not talk to the police. But one of the things that he said was, and he gave the crowd a test. In fact, the test he had taken out of the newspaper, because what it was an account of some kind of altercation, um, and it used the word mob, and then he came back and asked a question about how many of these folks had guns, I think they said, and he gave a multiple choice and asked people to raise their hands, and they couldn't even remember about the case. You know, how many shots were fired or whatever the question was. So he said that is one of the problems of mankind, is that we have very poor recall, instant recall. And when you do that, it's difficult to hold court sessions because people have extremely poor recall at times, and it sometimes sends people to prison because you say, yes, I know for sure, I remember very directly, there were 3 shots. Well, the article didn't say anything about weapons or guns. In that case, then how was it they knew something about shots? Well, that is one problem. The second thing I was thinking about, Terrance, as you were talking, is perhaps even our 4th graders, 5th graders, and 6th graders should be learning in their language arts classes where they're learning how to listen, learning how to write, precisely like you were talking about, and perhaps they ought to learn how to think precisely and not get taken up with such notions that cranberry juice carried in an orange cup is not moonshine. You see, I'm wondering if the defendants were well equipped in how they handle information, then maybe they wouldn't get so duped by fancy talking prosecutors. By the way,
Yeah.
some of these fancy talking prosecutors can dance a real number all around you, can't
Oh
they?
yeah, I can recall one case that we're both familiar with, in which a state-sponsored attorney had, in a lawsuit against a police officer, had basically said, well, this lawsuit should be thrown out because probable cause has already been effectively decided, because the initial conviction involved in the case. I mean, there was an initial conviction, even though it's been overturned. There was still a conviction, so
Yeah.
the probable cause has been resolved. Now, he was basing this argument on the fact, or on an assumption that it was a malicious prosecution lawsuit, and he went through various details in this case, through 9 pages, to try to citing all these malicious prosecution cases and justifying that this case should be thrown out. Well, this lawsuit was not filed as a malicious prosecution action, but the judge in the case, this is a federal district court judge, went ahead and sided with this state-sponsored attorney.
Yeah, right.
So, this is what goes on all the time, and I've looked at a lot of cases, and it's offensive to the whole notion of fair play and justice in this country. But, we just got to be mindful. I'm going to keep reiterating because I think a lot of people should be aware of this, that the absence of an issue does not mean the issue is absent. So when you read these legal cases, don't think that for 1 second that they're 100% legitimate. A lot of times they're not, because there might have been something fishy going on in the court proceeding, and you had these we're inundated in the court system with Tim Dunleavys. We have them all
Right.
over
With the orange juice, cranberry juice mixed
Right.
in there.
Yeah.
And when we go to the commissioner of the league, like the people went to the commissioner of the NBA, we go to the commissioner of the judicial system. Bad calls, they're basically going to say bad calls are fair game, or you have a process to. Actually, they're going to say, no, you're complaining about the points. You're complaining about the game result. You're not complaining about the bad call. That's what they're going to tell you in the form letter.
Right.
You're not actually complaining, because they're not even going to consider for 1 second that there was a bad call. They're going to say, well, maybe you just are not happy with the result, so therefore you can appeal. Well, what's the result of the appeal going to do if you have another Tim Dunleavy at that appellate level that's going
Right.
to make another bad call?
Sure.
So we have a system that's designed to perpetuate bad calls.
Correct.
And that's the problem with the United States justice system.
And
in
if
my
you don't
opinion.
like it, appeal.
Exactly.
And
Appeal.
then give them more work to
Right.
do, and they get
Exactly.
paid.
But at
Sure,
some
appeal.
point, if it's ever going to be fair, we've got to pull out the Tim Dunleavys and say, hey, this guy raised this issue. You didn't even consider it.
That's right.
You brought up something that was totally irrelevant.
Right.
Until we have a system that's going to stand up and make examples out of judges that do these kind of wayward things, we're going to continually be in a state of bad judiciating, and everybody's going to be complaining. I mean, this is why the system is basically going to fall over on itself. We've
That's
got
right.
all these people going to all these cases, and it's ballooning. The litigation level is ballooning. The appeals are ballooning. That's because we don't have anybody that's willing to step in and say, well, we need to get the Tim Dunleavys out of the system. Because I think the court system would run a lot more efficiently if we had a court, we had the referees in there that are going to call and be fair about it and not sidestep issues.
Correct.
Like Duck Dodgers. We need Buck Rogers. We don't need Duck Dodgers.
Hey, I want to thank you for
All right.
that clarification of what a rotten system looks like. Don, you have a story here that you started last week or a couple of weeks ago, talking about selling children. Can you finish up that story for us?
Sure. Why don't you put this picture on the screen to begin with, and that'll show for sale our little children, mostly the children under 5, like this one. Under 5 years old, blonde, blue-eyed, $5,000, a top-of-the-line product. And I'll just read the first paragraph there and move on. We're going to take you behind the lies into the ugly truth that is destroying families for profit every day in every community across America. You won't want to believe it, but when you see their faces, hear their voices, you will understand why this is happening and what it means to your own life, even if you don't have children. Okay, last week I read to you a couple pages, and we ran out of time, so I'm going to uh, start in where I left off last time. The system became a template for kidnapping, carried out by barely educated caseworkers who were told that they made the law. Who made the law? Caseworkers. This itself had become a tenet of belief held by those in power as the founders of constitutional law continued to be eroded by a judiciary who graduated from law school ignorant of America's foundational documents. The shift from constitutional law to statute and whim of court, low-level government employee, and law enforcement is documented in Anti-Government Movement Guidebook, published by the National Center for State Courts in 1999. Terrance, maybe that's the reason why when we started the program here we talked about needing a constitutional amendment. Well, why didn't we need it back when the Constitution was written? Well, maybe because we were under common law, and we've been under common law, which gives parents and their families a whole lot more rights.
Yeah, I agree.
And so around the 1920s, the attorneys snuck in the statutes that we have today, and we lost our common law rights. The stage was set, and the freeing frenzy was about to begin. The process goes through the 3 stages of slow death. Ripped from the families, the children are bewildered, afraid, vulnerable to the system. The process hinges on secrecy and an asserted immunity from accountability for all involved. Power through the government, but unacknowledged transfer from the Constitution to government by statute, code, and whim renders all of these outside government vulnerable. Caught in that process, parents lose track of all the things that brought happiness and normality to their lives. Years later, this will mark them. Most will never recover. And then to make things worse, is from generation to generation, it's getting worse and worse. This is the story of 3 families. Each of their stories is still in motion because the pain never stops. That's true. If you love your children, if you love your grandchildren, and you lose them, the pain never stops. Stage 1, Manatee County, Florida has long made a business of stealing children. Doesn't make any difference which state of the union we're in. The problem still exists. Families who settled there do not know that, however, they are attracted to the weather, the beauty of the area. If they knew, they would never settle any place in Florida, which is arguably has the most, arguably, because I don't necessarily agree with this part, the most corrupt CPS system in the nation. The county is run by a board of commissioners who meet at this well-polished table. It's well-polished here in Iowa. In Des Moines is the county seat. Can you call it a county seat now? But here in the state. Children are a commodity for which there is a steady and growing market, both in the United States and across the world. People from the United States go to the other countries where the children are kidnapped, and they adopt those children and bring them back to the United States. And I'm sure a lot of children go from the United States to other countries, and parents adopt children out over there. Don't you hear the children crying? We need to adopt these children. They came from hurting, abused homes. Some of them were never abused at all. Most of them weren't. Under the, if you really check what's happening in the homes, they shouldn't be terminating rights right and left. That's probably the reason why the Constitution was written up the way it was. We didn't have any problems in 1776 for termination of parenting rights. Okay, the article goes on. Child sex slaves, arrive in Europe and elsewhere from unspecified locations. Child sex slaves. What are these, dogs? Cats? No, they're human children. Don't anybody realize what the government is doing to us, to our children? They snatch them from one family at a time. Shh, shh. Don't say anything. Nobody knows what's going on with your next door neighbor. Children taken from homes routinely end up in the porn industry. It has been going on for many years, but since it did not impact most of us, it was easy to ignore. But as counties across the country have cycled down into bankruptcy, the need to pump harder for every buck to be made has become more compelling. Today, it is not just the most vulnerable who are targeted but families that would have been passed over as too well connected. In this Florida county, the pumping is in fast forward. Now the next one, Monday, June 2nd, 2008. The two young sons of Robert's family were dropped off at the home of their babysitter, Christina, here in Florida. This is a Florida story. Both parents work. Michelle and James are both veterans of the U.S. Navy who met while in service to their country. Both came from families with long and honorable histories of serving in the military. Their oldest son had been disciplined by his father the day before for jumping up and down on his baby brother, a potentially life-threatening activity. Spanking was the kind of discipline James himself experienced as a child growing up in Tennessee. The spanking had left a slight bruise. CPS arrived at the babysitter's home at 9:30 a.m. They proceeded to strip the two boys and photograph them in the nude. Here in Iowa, that's not legal, but who's to challenge them? They questioned them for an hour. This was a bewildering and frightening experience for the boys. Even adults don't like something like that. The first James and Michelle heard of this was when Michelle received a phone call at 3:30 from Alyssa. Habib presented herself as, that's her last name. Habib presented herself as an agent for the Child Protective Services, demanding that the couple present themselves for an interview. No criminal complaint was presented, but the process of intimidation and fear was launched. John?
Well, when I saw that for the first time, I thought, isn't it tragic that we have these markets in which we are actually marketing children? And I think it's sad to have a system that is so open to corruption of this sort, to the point where we can sell babies. And we know that that's against the law, but where money is involved, the law is sometimes overridden. Here are some numbers that may be of help to you as you struggle with the Department of Human Services and the Juvenile Court. We'll see you next week.